past 5 years. So before I start, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land on which we are having this event tonight, and I want to pay my respect to the past, present, and emerging leaders. So welcome to another UNPACK event. UNPACK is an event where we unpack difficult conversations and important topics which could often be overlooked in the Muslim community, unfortunately. And tonight, alhamdulillah, we have, I think, a very good lineup of speakers and plenty of expertise and experience regarding the topic that we have. It is perhaps a difficult topic. For tonight, we've chosen divorce, and inshallah, we're hoping to have an open and robust conversation around this topic, inshallah. So I want to introduce our speakers for tonight. Let me start with my right, Sister Tamana Daqiq. Sister Tamana has got 15 years of experience as a solicitor in family law, and she has co-founded Hikmat Legal. And she is an accredited mediator and family dispute resolution practitioner. Sister Tamana has been a panelist on the ABC's Around God Forbid program. She has published op-eds in the outlets. She is a passionate community worker. She has contributed, even just from Israel, over many years, and continues to do so in the community services and programs that we provide. Sister Tamana is going to be the facilitator tonight, but she has been promoted at the last second to speak up. Self-promoted because of the visitors that we have tonight. So she'll be representing that, inshallah. Thank you and welcome, Tamana Daqiq. We have Soumaya Najjarin joining us tonight. She's a senior public policy professional and postgraduate student. She is the founding director of New Beginnings, which is a not-for-profit providing emotional and spiritual support to people who have been navigating divorce. And she has pioneered the first divorce peace support recovery program in Australia. I think you had one this morning, so just over here in this very room, I believe. We're looking forward to hearing from you as well, Soumaya. We have Dr. Anisa Buckley, and she has over 20 years of experience in numerous Muslim community organizations in Islamic education, capacity building, advocacy. And although she works as a specialist, a finance specialist at Amana Islamic Finance, she has authored a book which is on this very topic tonight called Not Completely Divorced, Muslim Women in Australia Navigating Muslim Family Laws. So we're definitely looking forward to hearing from you as well, Dr. Anisa, inshallah. And last but not the least, I have Sheikh Bilal Dannoun here on my left. He normally needs an introduction, but just to follow due process, inshallah. Sheikh Bilal does the full cycle as we're speaking tonight. So he marries people off, he gives them counseling, he counsels them. He even has an on-demand course if anyone's interested. It's called the Muslim Marriage Course, the 5 C's to a happier, healthy, and thriving relationship. I am myself, I have subscribed myself and have greatly benefited from it. And Sheikh Bilal also does divorces as well. So I think we do have that expertise here tonight as well. Okay, so without further ado, inshallah, we get started with a bit of a look into divorce. So if I could ask, maybe I could ask with Sheikh Bilal here and Mr. Tamana, you could also add, but feel free to our other panelists as well, inshallah. So what does divorce generally look like in the Muslim community, Sheikh? And what pathways do people follow, I guess, when they're getting divorced? Just to give us a bit of a glimpse of what divorce looks like in the Muslim community, inshallah.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Jazakumullah khairan, Ustad Ahmed, for having us here to discuss and unpack a very important topic. SubhanAllah, when it comes to divorce, it's a very sensitive topic, But one thing I'd love to say from the get-go is that divorce is actually a solution to a problem. So often we think of divorce as, of course, it comes with its challenges, it comes with its heartaches and hardships, but we must remember that Allah Azza wa Jal has legislated it and has legislated it for a good reason. Unlike, for example, maybe some cultures out there or some faiths out there that may not allow for marriage, for divorce to take place after marriage. So if a couple find themselves in a dysfunctional marriage and in a toxic marriage, there must be a way out, and that way out is through divorce. So Islam, alhamdulillah, gives us these solutions to our everyday problems, and divorce is something that is in the Muslim community is increasing, and especially amongst the more younger generation. More so, we're seeing divorce become rampant or increased in the younger and upcoming generation. I remember saying to my wife when I was starting to counsel the younger ones some years ago, and I said to her, looks like this generation is going to keep me really busy. And that's been really the case, with divorces. But it's not limited to any one culture. Divorce is quite spread over different cultures. There are some cultures that you find the rates are very, very low. You don't really see them much. But then there's some cultures you see them more than other cultures.
And with, I guess, the divorce rates being over 50%, I don't think we can pretend that we are immune as the Muslim community from this either. Sister Tamana, what about your observations from, I guess, being in the legal field? And I'm assuming you've been across certain situations and families yourself.
Oh, yes. So I think, look, divorce looks very different across the spectrum of the Muslim community. And it's really important to recognize that the Muslim community is quite diverse in their approach to divorce. Oftentimes, the way they process or the processes they undertake look very different based on cultural group, age, all sorts of factors, the level of conflict in the relationship. So, for example, people belonging to an Arab-speaking community tend to lean towards navigating divorce through the imams. The religious divorce is something that they really sort of lean towards, whereas people from the Afghan or Turkish community tend to go more towards a civil divorce. And then many of these people in the community also are weaving between two systems of divorce, the religious and the civil. So divorce looks very different for everybody. And I think that's really important to recognize. It's not one linear approach that people take. And people in high conflict situations, for example, because safety is an issue, will have a very different pathway to divorce. They'll have police involved, they'll have AVOs in place. Amicable relationships will have more mediators involved, family involved. So divorce looks very different across the community. And it's important that we're having this discussion because I think it's really important to normalize divorce, not to encourage it. I mean, we're all for keeping marriages together, healthy marriages together. But like you said, I think the last data was there's a little bit of a drop in divorce rates, actually. It's around 44% at the moment, which is still quite high in Australia. In the US, it's around 50%. But if it's so high in rates, then we should normalise it. And I think some of the issues that are around stigmas and things like that, I'm sure we'll get into, I think we need to move away from that and have these open, honest discussions about divorce.
Yeah, thank you, Sister Tamana. That's still, I guess, 1 in every 2 people when we think about it, right? So it's still affecting every second person. But let me, Soumaya, perhaps I think if you would like to take this question, what are some of the common reasons that people get divorced? You're working with, I guess, people who have gone through this journey. What are you coming across? What patterns are you seeing yourself?
When you ask that question, it's an important question, but it can be, it's kind of like it takes you down a rabbit hole. It depends on who you ask.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
It depends on who you ask. The common themes that we've seen emerge, for context, when we launched New Beginnings, we launched with a survey to community and asked them to share their experience of healing and coping after divorce. Now, that, of course, opens up a conversation with the broader community as you start to explore the why. You start to hear some different themes, see some different themes. So for the men, amongst the men that we spoke to, the most common theme that came up was neglect, emotional neglect, lack of attention that the man was experiencing from his partner. The women were experiencing emotional neglect from the partner, a lack of awareness of communication style. Then there was promiscuity and infidelity came up as a common theme. So the why people get divorced is broad and varied. But what's important to raise here and bring to the attention is amongst the groups of people that we spoke to, many of them had actually exhausted all avenues in trying to repair the relationship. And in some instances, when we consulted with some of the clinicians and the professionals in the community, one counsellor said to me, mostly the men would come to him when they knew the relationship was over, when the wife had flagged and signalled Mayday, the relationship is in trouble. For the women, it was right from the beginning, even before the consideration to divorce was given, it was that constant sense of, I think I need to improve something in myself. I'm going to go and see a counsellor. I'm going to speak to a counsellor. Maybe it's me. And a lot of it is tied to the self-worth and concepts of self-worth. So those are the common themes that we saw emerging as to why people are getting divorced.
Okay, sure. And Dr. Anisa, I guess with your book especially, have you discovered anything around the stigma of this concept of divorce, as Tamana was just talking about, in the Muslim community? Is it a bigger stigma than the rest of the society? What have you seen in your research and in your work?
Well, I guess that's a tough question to ask because I was focusing more on the Muslim community.
Yep.
Because there's not much research that's out there about the Muslim community. There's a lot more now. I know Tamana and I were working on a project with Associate Professor Rina Graham. So it's good that there's a lot more research that's out there. But back in the time when I was doing my research, there wasn't as much, particularly in terms of the qualitative research. So I did a lot of interviews with women, and particularly I wanted to look at women's experiences. And I also interviewed shuyukh, I interviewed Muslim psychologists and counselors, I interviewed Muslim community organizations. So a lot of the different groups and people and points of support that women would probably go and approach. And I think, although it's hard to kind of make, generalizations, I feel that perhaps with the, if, Sheikh Bilal says that there's a lot more divorces that he sees, that it could be seen in a good way and perhaps not a good way, but it could be seen that there's a lot more awareness around the fact that, well, perhaps this is not working and perhaps we need to do something about it. And if there are a lot more divorces, then perhaps that might be, like Sheikh Bilal said, that it's a solution. It is an option there for people who are in an unhappy relationship, and it is something that is permitted. So generally speaking, I guess with the Muslim community, it could vary according to, age and generation. It could vary according to amount of time, sort of, Australian born versus new arrivals, because new arrivals, again, they have a lot of trauma. They have a lot of issues that can affect, their mental health, can affect the relationship in the way, especially when you're thinking about, moving countries, adjusting, and perhaps, for some men, I know that there's a lot of studies about communities where the husbands have had a really good job in their home country, come to Australia, come to Western countries, now suddenly have to start from the beginning again. And that affects their self-worth considerably. And that those mental health, those psychological pressures do filter down into the relationship, and they do affect the relationship between husband and wife, between the parents and the children. So there's a lot of factors that impact it. So I think that it could be a good sign that there's perhaps people are being able to access this pathway, but also there's a lot more research that needs to be done in this area. And the more we get to learn about it, and the more services and and the more discussions we have around this, I think it's only going to help us be able to address it better.
Thank you. Sheikh Bilal, I'm just going to come to you in a second, but before I do, just want to hear from these two ladies here. What has your experience been about it, whether it be a stigma or not in the Muslim community? Yeah, go.
I'm going to add to what Anisa's said. And I would argue that yes, stigmas still exist around divorce. And I argue that based on some of the qualitative data we're seeing come out of our survey. Now, of course, this is inconclusive and it needs further investigation and research to be considered concrete. But the Muslim community, the way we're organised as a Muslim community, is there are many subcultures, and stigmas they vary based on the community. And yes, we can acknowledge that the stigmas around divorce are no longer the same as they were, say, 16 years ago when I experienced my divorce, and I remember those very clearly. They are still around and they emerge in different ways, right? And how we know that, by virtue of the hesitancy and reluctance of community members, women and men, to discuss openly their divorce experience, or to identify their status as being a divorcee. One community member, when we launched, when we were having this discussion in an open place, she whispered, she said to me, "I'm divorced," in a very low tone. And I remember looking in a puzzled way, because she was surrounded with other people from her culture. She didn't want people to know that she had that status. So yes, stigmas still exist. They're not as prominent. We're evolving as a community. And I think one of the strongest remedies to addressing these stigmas is to normalize the narrative around divorce and link it back to our prophetic stories.
Okay.
That's what I would add to that.
Thank you. That's why I'm going to come to you in a second, Sheikh Bilal, inshallah. But
Do you want to go there?
No, let's inshallah. Let's come over to you.
Look, my perspective is probably similar anecdotally. Obviously, I haven't done the research around stigmas, but certainly it is people's experience who come to me that they are experiencing a stigma. They do feel on the out. They do feel like they have failed. And that might not be specific to the Muslim community. I think individuals generally, when marriage doesn't go well, they feel like they have failed. But certainly there is more stigma in some communities within the Muslim community over others. So I have clients that are very hush-hush, like won't even meet me at my office. I will have to go out and meet them somewhere in secret because they don't want to be seen, going to see a lawyer. I know that when I go to social events, I won't acknowledge clients because people don't want to be seen as seeing a lawyer.
They walk the other way when they see
I don't know, but just out of courtesy for my clients, I will not acknowledge them. And it's interesting because I think the stigma even goes to the family lawyers. I mean, I have heard people say to me, I think, you've got a bit of a reputation, you divorce people. And I say to them, look, they do that themselves. I don't think I'm doing that.
Just facilitate.
But I think because the stigma is there, it kind of does, people do feel it, at least. I think it might be changing. I think these kind of conversations would be changing it, but certainly we're not at a point where people are relaxed about the idea of divorce.
Okay, no worries. Well, thank you. Dear Sheikh Bilal, just coming over to you, how was it during the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the companions and, that generation? Was it a stigma back then? How was divorce treated at the time? And what was the experience like?
In the research that I've done around divorce during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and amongst the Sahaba, I don't recall coming across divorce being a stigma. I don't recall that. I don't recall seeing any talk in the community, in the Muslim community at that time. At the end of the day, it's Sharia. it's legislation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is legislator, and Allah is the all-wise, and there must be wisdom in this. So I think, I remember doing a little bit of research and struggling to find, the companions' names that divorced. I mean, there was an odd incident here or there, whether it was Mughith and Barira, whether it was the Prophet ﷺ, and Sauda, his wife Sauda thought that he will divorce her, and so then she offered her day to Aisha radiallahu anha. The Prophet ﷺ himself never divorced any of his wives, from what we understand from the seerah. Like I said, I find it a struggle for me to find that there was a stigma during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So unless, I'm happy to be corrected if there's any other research that you can think of, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. I like the word normalize. I like that we should normalize something that Allah has normalized. Allah Azza wa Jal has normalized it, and He has a chapter in the Quran. It's called Surah Al-Talaq, and the chapter, subhanAllah, the entire surah is named after this concept of talaq, of divorce. So again, it's something that we really need to educate the community, and this is why I'm really happy that I'm sitting amongst you, inshallah, and having this conversation around a topic that's very important, because you don't want to be you don't, saying the word divorced, you're divorced, it should be able to just flow freely from your mouth, and unfortunately it can't flow that freely because of the stigma, because of the cultural expectations, and so I don't know. I hope I answered that question for you. I don't know if any of the sisters have done any research into this area. Please, sister.
Yeah, no problem.
I guess what we do know from the seerah is that before the Quran, before Islam came along, and before particularly that surah came along, divorce happened a lot in the Jahiliyyah time, and the husbands would divorce their wives and then marry them back again, divorce their wives, marry them back again. So similar to lots of rulings that came down through the Quran and through the Prophet's example, there was measures brought into place to try to protect that. That's why there was that rule about at-talaq marratan. It's only twice. You can only do it twice, and then the third time is final. And you can't just keep divorcing your wife, divorcing your wife. So it was an attempt to recognize that it existed, recognize that there was sometimes, there was a need for it, but that it wasn't something to be just done, and treating women as though they were property, and that they could come, and that they kind of very just arbitrary. Oh, I don't like you today, I divorce you, and then no, I changed my mind, come out. So then with the Quran, with the rulings, there were there was a 3-month waiting period. There was lots of different approaches, waiting, hoping for reconciliation, and trying to sort of instill a little bit more of taking the marriage seriously, and also respecting women's wishes, and granting women options for divorce as well.
Thank you. Yeah, Alhamdulillah, Islam came and regulated many things at the time, which were unregulated and just at the whims and desires of people, right? So beautiful. Just moving on from that question, are there any barriers to man or woman from getting divorced here in Australia? So Tamana, so I'm going to go straight to you.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think, look, there are many barriers for divorce, particularly from my experience, it affects the women.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for that is because Islamically, generally, the divorce is issued by the man.
Yep.
And if it's not issued by the man and women want to seek a divorce, they oftentimes find themselves very confused about how to go about it. Now, those who are connected to community will ask around, where do I go to get a divorce? How do I go about it? And a lot of women just follow, even the ones that are ordinarily not religious or practicing, want to do marriage and divorce by religious standards. So they will follow what they are told. Now, when they go through processes, in my experience and in our research that we did, Anisa and I, we found that, you know, women are going through the imams, and there are different, I know there are different councils, but the prominent one in Sydney is ANIC, the card process. That process is very difficult for a lot of women. It's difficult for the imams too, I acknowledge that. But it's very difficult for a lot of women because they're seeking to leave a relationship, but they have to wait for this man to grant it. But they have to wait for the imams to get through to that man to grant it. So you can imagine they do that. On the side, they have to navigate arrangements for the children. They have to navigate financial security and property settlement. They have to consider, am I divorced? Am I married? You know, how do I go about getting an Australian divorce? Because I'm registered in Australia. So if I get the religious divorce, it's not sufficient. I have to do this process as well. It is a very difficult and complex you know, web to kind of try and navigate for a lot of people, particularly women, I think, in our community. For men, I'm not saying it's not difficult. I think separation and divorce is difficult for men and women, but because from the Islamic lens, they do have the issuing of the divorce and they can leave the relationship, then it's a little bit easier, because if they choose to leave, then that's it, it's done. But for the women seeking it, certainly there are many barriers. And I think it's a very complex and difficult thing that as a community we're grappling with. We're not the only community. The Jewish community also grapple with it. I think they have more serious problems than us. They have a council like we do, the Beth Din, where the women go and try and seek a divorce. I know that the imams are working very hard to fix their processes, to try and, you know, get on top of a lot of the issues, but it's a hard thing to do. We have issues like domestic violence, drug addiction, you know, mediating between couples is not an easy thing. The skill set required for that. It's not just the Islamic knowledge that is required, but you need a lot more than that. And oftentimes, you know, it's not easy for one individual to do that. So really, you know, I think our community needs a lot of resources in this space.
Which I think we'll come to that as well. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up as well, Tamana. But I just want to hear from a sheikh's perspective, right? So he is, let's say, a person who's in the middle of all this, right? So how is it from your perspective, Sheikh, in terms of this navigating divorces, barriers, and what do you see? What do you experience?
Yes, I do agree that the sisters, the wives, have it very hard, especially when they are in an abusive marriage, or there's safety issues, there's children, financials. It is complicated. You're absolutely right, Sister Tamana. And the problem that we have is we have many husbands out there that are just very stubborn, who want to play hardball. They don't want to divorce. They want to be spiteful. And so, subhanAllah, most of the time it's the wives that are reaching out to the imams. It's a given. It's always most of the calls and the messages that somebody like me will receive in this space or in this position is most of the time, like 97% of the time, it's going to be around marriage and divorce. Okay, either they're calling me up to get married, or they're calling me up to get divorced.
Get out of it.
So subhanallah, and I've actually you know, you just get so used to human behavior and the questions, and so I've actually got templates on my phone. Believe it or not, I've got templates, because we just know how this is going to go.
Cut the part out.
So basically, you know, sister would message, I want a divorce. Okay, so part of my template would say, oh, okay, inshallah, you know, best practice would be that I, you know, see you both and do some counseling and try and salvage the marriage. And then, you know, and then if that's not an option, because it's sometimes not an option, because it's far worse than just that, or to be on that. And so then we say, all right, is he cooperative? If he's cooperative, you know, send me his name and number. I want to talk to him. Then she'll say, no, he's not cooperative. He doesn't want to divorce me and things like that. So let me try. But then the next message after that, the next template would be, well, look, it looks like he's not cooperative. You need to contact ANIC or card, and then put your case forward so that they can deal with the marriage and either grant you an annulment of the marriage, a fasakh, or maybe khulu if he agrees eventually. So yeah, it is challenging to navigate. There are ones that come through and say, yeah, we're both amicable, we're both on the same page. We just want to do things Islamically. We just want to do things right. They're like easy.
Is that 5%?
Oh yeah. No, they're very, very minimal. Yeah, very minimal. So my job would be always when I'm speaking to the husband, it's like, why do you want to oppress her? Why do you want to oppress yourself? Do you understand like you're causing more damage? Eventually, she's going to get her divorce. Why are you making this so hard for her? So we try and like make them feel Allah Azza wa Jal, remind them about Allah Azza wa Jal. Would you like this for your daughter in the future? Would you, we say a few things to just try and remind them, inshallah. But at the end of the day, yeah, some husbands, they play hardball, like they're so challenging. So yeah, this is why we send them over to ANIC. There are, there's the, imagine before ANIC. Imagine before having an actual body, it was so hard. So we have come some way, but we still got a long way. That's what I feel. And so personally, I don't grant any divorces or anything. I'm not authority, so I always give that to the leading figures, and it's better to come from a body of scholars than to come from one imam, because what we've seen as well is, and in this day and age, there isn't that respect that there once upon a time was towards imams. Imams and scholars aren't respected as much as they used to be, and they had some sort of authority. Now, they will actually threaten the imam. They will actually come after the imam. You're divorcing my wife, or you divorced me from my wife, and yeah, you get and I get messages up to today. Is it possible that the imam divorced my wife from me without my permission, and and things like that, and and I say, look, I don't have the whole entire story. You need to contact the imam and check with him.
Yes, Matthew, you wanna stay safe.
Well, we have to.
But then you should divorce so you can stay safe.
It is.
That's right. It's an emotional roller coaster. I had friends like whom I personally knew. I have friends who are going through divorce, and it's just a lot of pain, a lot of emotion. So anyways, inshallah. Let's move on to the legal aspect. So can we have a look at the crossroads between the Islamic law and the Australian law when it comes to marriage? So how do they overlap? Perhaps what are the similarities, what are differences, or maybe just quickly, Mr. Tamana or Dr. Anisa, would you like to say a few words on that? Well, let's start with you, maybe.
I guess briefly, there are some similarities in that if you get married, a nikah is considered as a marriage in Australia, even if it's not registered, because it fulfills the common law rules of marriage. So simple.
So you go to a sheikh, you get your nikah done, you're married.
You're married. But, I would recommend everyone get it registered. But if you don't get it registered, you're still considered married, right? If you follow the steps of nikah. And you've got a person, an imam doing it. On the marriage side, it's good. On the divorce side, it's more tricky. A divorce, Islamic divorce, does not equate to an Australian divorce. So people who are going to go down that Islamic route will also need a civil divorce. The other way around, though, I have heard, and the imam can correct me, might work as a solution in that if you get an Australian divorce, you've got a 12-month separation period, right? You get the Australian civil divorce. I know that the European Fatwa Council accepts the civil divorce, like their imams accept the civil divorce as a divorce, because the man has to sign it. There's a process of a court. So I don't know where we are in the Australian space around that issue, but certainly your IDA period is, kind of finished depending on, when that separation started. If he's come to the table and signed the divorce or part of that process in court, the imams, and even the imams here who we interviewed, and I won't mention names, but interviewed the board, they accepted and acknowledged that if an individual gets an Australian divorce, they are almost compelled to give them the divorce, because they can't hold them. The problem arises that if they don't give them the divorce and that person starts a new relationship, then they're technically married to two people.
Mm.
So a lot of the imams are like, if the Australian divorce, if they come with a sealed divorce certificate,
Mhm.
we will fasten that process and make sure they get their Islamic divorce.
I see.
So that's the divorce spaces where there's the difficulty around it. Obviously, the separation period is 12 months versus the 3-month or 3 to 4 months, 3 cycles in the Islamic separation period. Obviously, in the civil system, men and women can initiate divorce.
Mm.
Interestingly, though, women tend to be the initiators
Mm.
across the board.
There's some around, I was remembering a stat around 70% or something. Like, I can't recall off the top of my head, but
In
did you-
Australia?
yeah, just
Yeah, so in Australia, I know the stats. So about 33% of women are the initiators,
okay,
28% men, and the rest are joint.
okay, I see.
So you can do
okay,
joint
okay,
applications,
I
but
see.
women tend to be the ones that
Mm.
initiate it. And I know, in the Muslim space, it's
Mm.
usually women initiating that
Mhm.
process.
I see.
So I guess there are some similarities, but certainly the overlap and the complexity makes it very difficult for people
Yeah.
as it stands at the moment.
Yeah. Sheikh Bilal, it'd be good to hear from an Islamic perspective, how does Islamic law, how does separation take place? And maybe if you could touch on what
Yeah.
Tamana said about the 12-month separation as well.
Yes, so with regards to the civil divorce, not all the imams would agree that a civil divorce is a binding Islamic divorce. And now we're going to have difference of opinion, and especially in this community where you got imams from different schools of thought. And this is where it gets really complicated in the West. Unlike if you're in like one particular country, that's just one, maybe, one fatwa, one imam, one head mufti, we don't have that unity when it comes to that. So there is going to be difference of opinion straight off the cuff there. And then it comes down to, well, the civil, did the husband sign on the civil documents? Because he does have the option to reject signing on those civil papers, but it's still, the woman can still be granted the divorce in civil law, even if he rejects they go through all that process. Now we go back to the issue of the Islamic initiating an Islamic divorce. So there's an initiation by the husband. So the wife may request from the husband to divorce. The husband says, "Okay, I'm going to divorce you." So this is talaq, divorce, and there are some rules there as well. And I don't want to get too technical, but this is where it gets a bit complicated because, again, different schools of thought. So if the husband divorces his wife, for example, in a state of rage and anger, some scholars, they say, well, that's not a binding divorce. And then the debate is, well, what's anger and what's rage? And that's another debate. Are you in the middle there? Are you off your head? Do you recall, etc.? So that's not. And then there's the divorce that happens during a woman being in a state of menses, and then that, according to some, that divorce is not binding. Then there is the 3 divorces saying your divorce, your divorce, your divorce, while some scholars say that's 3 divorces, and others say no, it's only 1 divorce. Can you see where we're going with this? It's really complicated, right? And so, but if we're just looking at a really like easy one, and he just said, look, things aren't working out, you're divorced. First time, second time, now there's an iddah period, there's a 3 months, 3 menstrual cycles. If a woman doesn't get her cycles, then it's 3 months. And then basically she's free as a bird, and they go their separate ways, right? And he owes her the dowry. He owes her the mahar, if there's any outstanding mahar. Now, a lot of the times, the point where divorce becomes difficult, and I think Sister Tamana will now know where I'm going with this, is the dowry. That the husband doesn't want to pay the dowry. So, Sister Anisa here. So he doesn't want to pay, because we're talking about, especially if it's the Arab community, their mahars are very high. So, equivalent of one. So usually he just wants her. He wants her to say, no, you got to divorce me. And if you forfeit your mahar, if you forfeit your dowry, then I will grant you that divorce. Now that divorce is called khulu'. So she's now she's compensating for that by way of forfeiting her dowry. Now, this is what happens. the sister will call me and I'll say, well, look, you've got options. He either divorces you, he doesn't want to divorce me. It's really bad, Sheikh, you know. Well, do you want to initiate? Yeah, I'll initiate. Okay, sister, but do you understand that for you to make this easy and smooth, to initiate, you have to give up your dowry. Oh, but why should I? He's in the wrong. Okay, I understand that he might be in the wrong, but do you want this to be smooth, or do you want to go through a judicial system? No, I want to go through the judicial system. All right. And then she realizes what a process that is, and she comes back. She goes, no, I'll forfeit. It's really crazy. Like, and it's unfortunate because she could be. She deserves that dowry, but she just wants out, and it's good. And then the question is, does he even have it? Is he even going to give it? It's really messy. So now the khulu is where most of the time he will grant it to her on the basis that she forfeits the mahar. So if she forfeits the mahar, he'll say, yep, Sheikh, give it to her, right? And it's really like it's playing below the line, but it is what it is. So then this is recommend. Also, there's a difference of opinion whereby is khulu considered 3 menstrual cycles or only 1 cycle? And so the opinion that I personally follow is that khulu constitutes only 1 menstrual cycle or 1 month, and they can't go back to each other unless it's a new marriage contract. Because it's an annulment of the marriage, and we've got to redo the contract. Now, speaking of mahar, speaking of the dowry, if the husband divorces, then he owes her that dowry. Let's say he's initiating. He owes her that mahar. Now, the question is, what if he doesn't pay the mahar? What does she do then? So what we find is a way around this. If he's divorced her, and by the way, unfortunately, most men who divorce in this country a wife, they don't pay the mahar. Most of them don't pay the mahar. There has been, so what I would say, look, I would say to the sister this, go to an imam body, let them give a verdict of whether, let them go through the process. If you really want that mahar, go through the process and let them give the verdict that you are owed the mahar. Now you've got a fatwa. Now you've got an Islamic stance, an Islamic position. And if he doesn't pay the mahar, now go to the civil system. If you go to the civil system, there's a case in 2012, Muhammad versus Muhammad. She got her mahar, right? I don't know if you know. So that case.
There's obviously a lot of written material.
Yeah, it was written, and that's why it's good to write. So sometimes some of the people that call me up for marriages, they go, we just want it to be verbal. I say, sorry, I'm not doing a verbal. There's people's rights here. I want to write it.
In that case, they also had independent legal advice, which made it under, a contract law rather than necessarily just under family law. Yeah.
I've read that as well.
So because of those particular conditions that they fulfilled, it was recognized by just out of interest, they didn't have a registered marriage. They had a nikah only marriage.
Yes.
And this is a really kind of unique case because it sets a precedent for a non-registered marriage to be able to be recognized and have a mahar enforced in the court. So this is a really good, precedent for Muslims, for Muslim women in particular, to say, look, if you want to have a marriage that you want to go ahead with, you can still get it, even if you want to have a nikah marriage, and everyone's free to choose what option they want to take. If they just want to go down the Islamic marriage path, then there are ways to be able to ensure that it is considered a binding financial agreement if they fulfill certain legal requirements. So
the sure way is don't defer the mahar, ladies.
Yes.
It up front.
Yes, and as
No joke.
Yeah, and this is Sister Tamana. I absolutely agree with you. Sisters are shooting themselves in the foot, and there needs to be more education about this. The best way with mahar is write an agreement that you get it in installments. Don't defer it and say we'll get it only upon divorce, because you're most likely not going to get it. Okay, so I did that with my daughter. I married off my daughter, and so we stipulated a mahar, and I got my son-in-law to give it to her in installments, right? Because you learn so many lessons, right?
think it's really important. It
You
sounds
got
funny.
merited.
Well, you know, a doctor and a lawyer, you probably would.
That's right. Instead of setting a high amount that is,
Yeah.
instead of setting some high amount that you're never going to see, set it at a level that
Absolutely.
the guy can give, not that
Yeah.
it's too low,
Mm.
but that you can get up front. And I think it's a gift upon marriage, not upon divorce.
Point. Just so one more point with with Sister Tamana, just finishing off on that point that we started. Sister Tamana said it's best practice to also do a civil. I agree, because in some countries they don't accept a nikah only nama, nikah nama or nikah certificate. I've had people reach out to me, they've traveled and they said, I need a certificate. The country that I'm in is not accepting the Islamic one. So it's always best practice to do Islamic and civil. You just never know when you're going to need that civil document.
And I just want to add to that, the emphasis here should be that this is actually a right that a woman has that is ordained by Islam. And a lot of sisters are unaware that it is within their right to ask for the mahar upfront. Okay. And I want to touch on one of the points that you raised, Sheikh Bilal, around, the barriers to divorce. And you mentioned the complexity that surrounds it. And I was trying to digest what you were saying about all the technicalities. And herein lies a problem. There is one key issue that we sometimes overlook. There is a resentment harboring amongst, anecdotally, the women, mainly we're seeing this. There is a resentment being harbored against the processes or the styles that the imams are using or employing to execute this process of divorce. The idea that, it is what it is. You've got to forfeit your mahar if you really want to expedite this process. It builds that kind of resentment in the women where they lose trust and faith in the system that is supposed to be built to protect their rights, to honor their rights. And the one thing that we want to try and resolve or discuss in a robust way, this intersection between the Australian legal system, the Islamic Sharia, the grey areas in between. There are a lot of synergies between the two systems. A lot of the sisters in particular who we're anecdotally seeing are at most significant disadvantage, are unaware of this. And there is a perception of transgression of faith that is being instilled in these women, in their thoughts, whether it's through culture, whether it's through family, that if you go down this route, then you have the wrath of Allah is on you. Or, for example, women who experience violence, domestic violence, you called the police. You have shamed your family. You have shamed yourself. This perception
The culture,
that you are,
perhaps,
could be cultural as well, but it could be understandings and underpinnings of faith and ideologies that people carry. So I just wanted to bring
No worries,
that up.
thank
It's an
you.
important point to raise.
My dad, my dad is an imam, and like he would never do a nikah before a civil marriage, except if it's like 1 week, maybe. Anything beyond 1 week, he'll never go near it. But yeah, I guess that's how he was, at the time. Okay. Yeah, beautiful conversation. I think that was. Thank you for sharing your insights. But I just want to move on to, for the interest of the time, to the healing part. And the second part of this event tonight will be question and answers. And I've already got plenty of questions lined up anyway, but I'm sure there's more questions here as well. We'll take it, or online. But so how does one heal from a divorce? Like we talked about how it is as a emotional roller coaster, and people really hitting the bottom sometimes, throughout this process. But yeah, do you see and how is it experienced from perhaps by man, by woman? Yeah, let's start with you. Maybe you've got the mic, Soumaya.
To understand healing, you must understand pain.
Yeah.
To understand pain, you must experience the pain, right? And healing is different to different people. If we're looking at the genders, right? So if you're looking at genders, a women's experience of the healing journey differs from men because the symptoms of divorce, the way they experience the pain of divorce is different. So from our group of men, our cohorts of men that we've spoken to, for them, the divorce is mainly around social isolation, You know, they're all of a sudden they've lost their networks, their social networks, the in-laws, the extended family. Other things for men include waking up and not having their children in the home again with them, you know, the routines that they're familiar with. For women, however, the list is longer, right? You've got the perception that your market value is now reduced, right? You're a divorcee who's going to marry you with the kids, one. You've got things like the ostracization amongst community, and that differs from community to community. In some instances, what we've seen is that there are prospective spouses will not approach a suitor if they know that one of their family members has a divorced status. This is the kind of ostracization of people. Then there's the financial, legal, etc. Right? So there is a difference in the pain, the isolation, and all of that. One common denominator is loneliness that's experienced. Now, as for healing, Anne Bouchot wrote an article. She's a psychologist, and she described the stages of healings in phases. One of the first phases, she said, is that acute phase, right? So the way I imagine it is like you're hemorrhaging, right? So what do you do when you're hemorrhaging? Your first priority, the first thing that preoccupies your mind is, I need to stop the bleeding. Right. So in that acute phase, you're going through replaying the memories, you're angry, you're anxious, you're upset, you're going through all these emotional cycles, and you're preoccupied with, how do I stop this? Right. So you might lean into your faith a little bit more. And this is what we've seen through our survey responses. We asked our community, we drew in the community voice and said, what helped you heal? Well, no surprises there. One of the first things that popped out in front of us was closeness to Allah, right? So applying, getting closer to the faith. Then the second stage is the acceptance phase. That's when you put your Band-Aid on. You apply the bandage on the wound. So you've stopped the bleeding, you've applied the bandage. And this is where you start to set up a cadence of activities and habits. You start to come up for air. Right? You start to say, okay, this is where I'm at now. I need the operational stuff done. Change the bank accounts, change the passwords. If you're going down the legal avenue, you commence those proceedings, right? Tidy up my living arrangements. Then you've got the adjustment phase. Now you've set all those things up and you're going through this phase where you are feeling a lot more comfortable and confident. You've tidied up the little messy things and you're starting to see the vision ahead. Then you have your healing, right? And the healing then becomes, I've got this, right? I've built a network. The how you heal, there's a long list, and all these psychologists will give you coping strategies. And I think some of the most common ones are support network. You can't emphasize how much support networks are important. Clinical help, the therapists and the psychologists, health and exercise, adjustments to your health and diet, meaningful activities, mindfulness, breathing. I mean, as Muslims, a lot of this stuff is already embedded in our teachings, right? So, subhanAllah, the way that these strategies converge, that connectedness to Allah, it's almost like a fitrah. It's almost like, you go back to that fetal position where I need you, Allah. Right, you're there. And then you start to expand your knowledge base, your spirituality, and connect deeply, and then everything starts to fall into place. So I gave you a bit of a long-winded answer. I tried to summarize it, but healing is not linear. It's because you're not experiencing divorce in a very structured way. You're thrown off. Predictability has gone out the window, and we're humans. We like to know what's next. And when you don't know what's next, it throws off your nervous system and you spiral out of control. Anyone like to add to that?
Thank you. Dr. Anisa?
I guess something that we touched on earlier, but also that I guess an opposite, even though we're talking about healing, but while some people may come closer to Allah and to Islam, there may be some people perhaps because of the religious abuse that a husband may use, the kind of, interpretations of Islam that some even perhaps family members, but like, you should go back to him, you should go, but we're not supposed to, and we'll use, these hadiths that is a very kind of a weak hadith when you look at the how it's ranked, but it is something that we throw around all the time. Oh, Allah, the throne of Allah, it's the most hated thing. So for some people, part of the healing process is, again, I definitely agree with you in terms of the support, but some of them may have a brief in that potential, that initial stage of, I don't want to have anything to do with the Muslim community. And part of that healing may be, and I know specifically in my research, I interviewed a few converts, and for them, the community and everything that happened with them, for some of them may have already had to go through a lot of trauma to become married, to become a Muslim, to, you know, find a husband. Sometimes, unfortunately, in some communities, there's a push to, oh, there's a new woman, Muslim convert, we need to get her married off. And she's pushed into marriage because she's told this is what a good Muslim woman is supposed to do. And then so having gone through that, and perhaps sometimes saying you should not communicate with your family, you should not communicate with it, they're not a good influence on you. So they're cut off from that family support. So then when it comes time, if the relationship breaks down, again, perhaps because of all these, what led up to it is rush, get in, blah, don't talk to your family. She's not able to get that feedback. Is he a suitable person? Is he this? Because everyone says, no, your parents wouldn't understand. And then, so then they sometimes are, again, that loneliness, but it's a double loneliness, because sometimes the family that of the convert, you know, individual would be like, well, you left and did what you wanted. So they have to try and build those barriers. And then they look at the community, the Muslim community, and say, well, you just discarded me. You just threw me into this, and then now you're not looking after me. So they have to try and build those relationships. So I know for some of the women that I interviewed, they left the Muslim community physically, like they moved out of it completely. They didn't want to have to interact with people and have everyone ask what happened, this and that. But also sometimes they were lucky enough to have the family support. The family said, come back. Sometimes the family then said, oh, well, you probably should leave this religion. It's not good for you. Sometimes they were supportive and said, look, you know what, you chose this, but we're here to help you. This happens to everybody, right? It's not just because of Islam. So again, Muslim converts are unique, they're a kind of a unique minority within the Muslim community that have a lot of unique challenges that they face, particularly in these areas, because they may have burned some bridges when they became Muslim. They may have had to repair some of those relationships. And so when they get divorced, there's an added shame and a stigma. People are saying, oh, you didn't do what you were supposed to. You still don't know enough about Islam. So there's so many layers and so many pressures put on Muslim converts, and particularly women. And so that's another area that definitely, you know, needs more research, but they have these unique experiences.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Anisa. You shared some beautiful insights there. Sheikh Bilal, can I come to you on this? Like, what's your views?
There was a lot to unpack right there. I'm just trying to recall some of the beautiful things that were said there. But definitely, like, even I had a recent case where the sister is a revert and there's 4 children and the husband is abusive. And that's the thing, these reverts and most women, their first point of contact is going to be an imam or a sheikh. And unfortunately, as I think Sister Tamana, I think she said before, that a lot of these imams or sheikhs, they're only looking at it from the spiritual lens and not from the mental health lens. So I think we need to knock on the doors of imams and say, hey, can we just share with you some statistics? Can we share with you some data, some information about why you might want to consider also why you might want to consider learning about mental health, learning about how when these people come to you, what to also offer them beyond just saying the fiqh or the rules and the regulations. And I was guilty of that, in my younger years, and I just looking through only through the lens of just the Quran and the Sunnah in dealing with problems, and then very quickly as we're with the world and of information and the information age, and we just started learning more and more about trauma and about mental health issues. And subhanAllah, I quickly started educating myself and learning about how to help these people, not just from a spiritual perspective, but I actually network with people who are the experts when it comes to drug addictions. So I've got actually a short list of my own personal experts that I really found they work really well, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's gambling, whether it's inappropriate content addiction. And so now it's a network. Mental health workers like psychologists that I deal with, interstate, even naturopaths, and even in my sessions we talk about health and the importance of exercise and the importance of nutrition in feeling better.
Healing, right?
In the healing process, it's really powerful. Like exercise and ensuring the good nutrition is there, but. I believe there's 3 F's, in dealing with the fate and dealing and the beautiful word of acceptance. You have to accept, and then the first F is faith. Turn to your deen, turn to Allah Azza wa Jal, and get excited about what Allah has in plan for you, because subhanallah, I've seen many divorce cases, and because I'm in both spheres. There's those that I marry off and then I divorce them and then I remarry them, right? No, I don't marry them personally. Just for the record, right? I marry them off again, right? Because you would get sort of rumors like that as well. But anyway, but and subhanAllah, you see how they're just glowing and they're just so happy, and you see them in coming to you and really down and out, and then you see them happy and excited. But like I said, divorce can be something very, very exciting. I don't look at divorce like it's a new chapter, it's a new beginning. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has got something better for you. And when you have that, that conversation with these divorcees, subhanAllah, it just gives them hope. It gives them optimism. So I say, focus on your salah, focus on your morning and evening supplications, focus on your tahajjud and your dua, focus on the second F, which is your family. If you have family, if you've been blessed, go to them. And if they're good for you, they're not going to bring you down. And then the third one is friends. The third F is your friends. And of course, make sure that you're speaking with the people who are just going to take you to that next, propel you to that next, inshallah, exciting chapter of your life.
I thought you were going to say the third F is food.
I'm for food.
No, inshallah. Well, we're going to have a very short break, inshallah. Speaking of food, we've got some, I think, tea, coffee, and some light refreshments, inshallah. So we'll come back in 10 minutes. So 8:20, we'll be back. But just before we break, I just want one sentence answer. How long, on average, does it take to heal in one sentence? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
Look, the general consensus is it takes between 2 to 3 years.
Okay, good.
The
That's
general
it.
consensus, right?
Okay.
Some people heal straight away, Ahmed,
Okay.
and they jump into the next marriage
Yep.
and they find happiness and healing in a relationship.
Okay.
Others don't. But there's a general up
Okay.
to 3 years. They say don't remarry.
Good. So that we know
3 years
how long
apart.
we need to heal. Okay, thank you. Let's go for a break. All right, inshallah. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back at 8:20, inshallah. Where is the tea and refreshment?
Outside.
Just outside? Yeah.
Very nice. Thanks.
All right, assalamu alaikum, everyone. We're back live, and so in this part, we'll just go off with question and answers. I can see some people taking notes, which is great. But if you have questions as well, please don't hold back. So what we'll do is I've got the questions feeding to the device that I have here from online, so that's fine. But for on-site, we'll probably just get one of these mics to go around. Maybe Sister Zahra can do that. But let me just start with an online question, and then if there's any on-site questions, we'll take it from there as well. It is obviously, as we mentioned, it's a bit of a difficult topic. Perhaps some people, we have a lot of online attendees tonight, and so quite naturally, there's no questions here as well. A few questions we've already covered, so I won't go into them. But so at the top of my question list, Sheikh, I guess this comes to you. Unfortunately, there's a growing trend in our community where men are getting a second and third wife in secret. I've heard about the second one, but I haven't heard about the third one. So, and only informing the first wife after the fact. From an Islamic perspective, is this grounds for divorce? We'll start with a tough one.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. To say that it's something that's common, that's growing. Allahu alam. I would know about it to some extent, being a celebrant myself, and the brothers reaching out to me to do that. So what we say to these brothers who are doing that without their wives, informing their wife, or their wife is not open to the idea, is to be very, very careful, because once she finds out, most likely, things are going to be very, very challenging on your relationship, on the family dynamics, on the children. It's not something that should be done without really having your wife on board. Now, we're just talking about doing this from a very Islamic perspective. Now, of course, it can't be done in Australia when it comes to civil law, and I don't know what Sister Tamana in a moment can probably share with us regarding these type of relationships from a civil perspective, and whether they're just de facto relationships. But we'll come to that in a moment, if you can get ready, Sister. But what I what I want to say there is, if your wife's not on board, don't do it. That's the short answer. It's very, very problematic. And even if your wife is on board, still reconsider not doing it. Why? Not from a legal perspective. I'm not going to go down that route. But I've seen the ramifications of doing it. I've had lots of cases that come through, and the wife was on board, but then she's no longer on board, right? And it becomes very problematic. So the question, but the main question was, is it grounds for a divorce? Well, look, if the woman can't handle it and she's suffering mentally, or he could be not fulfilling his duties towards his first family, then of course she has that avenue. She always has the option to come out of the relationship if this is really impacting her. So that's the short answer: is she has that option to leave if she wishes to, if it is problematic for her.
Did anyone want to say anything?
Yeah,
So
just to touch
please.
on, pick up on that legal aspect. So from a legal perspective, bigamy is against the law in Australia. So you can't be married to two people at the same time. It carries a jail sentence of 5 years. And if your wife is not on board, then you go down the legal route. If that comes to light, it can be really problematic. So I think that's a really important consideration. I think the other consideration, and I've seen this on the ground with women, is that the children of that marriage, the children that come later, or the first set of children, tend to not have their father listed as their father, right? So sometimes for Centrelink purposes or whatever, they don't have their father listed because only one woman is married to him. And so from a lineage perspective as well, I think it causes problems. A lot of women don't want to say that they are married out of wedlock, or their children are out of wedlock, but when they go to Centrelink and they are the second wife and they've got children, they can't say he's my husband. So he's either the boyfriend, which is Islamically incorrect, or she's had these children out of wedlock. So it creates a lot of shame in families, not just for the woman who's experiencing it, but for the children as well. So I think there's lots of social problems around it. There's obviously legal problems around it. So obviously, I'd say don't do it at all, but I think it's not something easy to navigate. And I think really we've got to look at the context that we're in. The law of the land is important. We cannot just flout it and do whatever we like. You don't want to end up in jail because you've married two women. That's just a silly thing to do in my mind.
Can I ask a question to Sister
Yes,
Tamana?
Yeah.
So have there been any cases whereby it's happened where the man has entered into another nikah and there has been a jail term, or do you know of any cases that you can share with us?
I don't know of any cases where the outcome has been that he's gone to jail, but I certainly had a bigamy case last year. And it's very serious. Even in the way you give evidence in the family law court, you've got to seek certain certificates so that you don't self-increment or criminalize yourself. So it's a very serious issue. And the reason for that is a lot of people don't realize when they do the nikah, it's actually a marriage in Australia. So they think, okay, I'll register this marriage, but the second marriage, I'll just do a nikah. And it's kind of like de facto, you know, to the authorities. But the reality is, if that woman went to court and proved that that was a marriage and you have a registered marriage to another one, then you've got two marriages. Even if you didn't register the first one and they went individually to lawyers and showed their wedding video, all the elements that are considered common law elements of a marriage, it would be deemed a marriage. And so you could face a bigamy charge. And I'll tell you this, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. If she wanted to take you down that path, certainly there would be criminal ramifications. I don't know of any cases where women have gone down that path. They usually are busy with the family law situation. To go down the criminal route, you've got to actually let authorities know, produce the evidence. A lot of women don't have the energy for that I have seen. But if you wanted to, certainly there is a pathway for that. So I would actually, and even with imams, I've said this very openly, I think be cautious around the advice you give on this, because you could actually be creating problems for yourself, especially the ones that are celebrants as well. I'm not sure you are as well. So,
yeah. So if they did it like just verbally, there's no documentation, then that's something that, and there's no videos that can get away with it. Like, how would this, let's say, for example, we do have cases whereby the wife is on board and there's a serious need. How could we do it without violating, I guess, Australian law?
Like, I think, I mean, even if you're not registering it though, like it's tricky because if they prove that there was a ceremony, it doesn't have to be a massive wedding ceremony. So if the woman can somehow prove, and I know we have witnesses in a nikah, so it can never be done between just two people. It can't be a secret really. So if you have witnesses, there is always potential to take that evidence to court and say there was a ceremony, there was a third person who was a celebrant or an imam present. This was the evidence that I have. It could well stand up in court. I mean, obviously it's situational specific, but it's very tricky to navigate. And I think this idea of a secret marriage, or I really think in the context we're in, we should not be advising men to do that, because not just for the social issues, but also for the real legal ramifications. It's serious.
So if for example, we have situations whereby men come here who have a wife overseas, and they come here for work, and then they want to be married to a woman here, and they've got a wife overseas. That's okay?
It's not.
Sorry.
So if she can, it's not okay. So if she can prove that he was married and is married to her, it's all about the evidence before the court. It doesn't matter where you get married. As long as there is two marriages, you can't have two marriages in Australia. So you cannot marry someone that is already married in Australia. The person who marries a second person, they have committed bigamy. So there are cases actually around this where people have married overseas and come here. Some of the bigamy cases are actually international.
Okay.
But certainly that's the same problem.
Sorry, I think Dr. Anisa wants to add some. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
I was going to just mention in the Muslim world that there is this situation of misyar marriages, which is exactly what you were mentioning. And
What
a
is it,
number
misyar?
misyar is sort of marriages of convenience. Sometimes they are secret in the sense that and in these situations, and there have been fatwas from Saudi scholars that permit it, and it is becoming, and it's quite, that has been picked up in, say, Egypt, but a lot of, say, for example, Muslim students who travel overseas, perhaps they either do another extra marriage while they're away overseas, and unfortunately it does breach international laws, and they can have real legal ramifications. But not just that, the Muslim countries, UAE and Jordan and Egypt, they recognize that this is not a sustainable practice, and they are trying to bring in, and lots of Muslim women's groups, legal advocates are trying trying to speak out about it and trying to get legislation changed in Muslim countries to be able to protect the rights of women. Because in these situations, unfortunately, what some of these fatwas are about is that if she's a second wife, that she can, he doesn't have to be responsible for maintenance. He doesn't have to be responsible for lodging, and he doesn't even have to visit her. So she doesn't deserve his cohabitation. And unfortunately, this is for whatever reason the result of international travel and study, and people say, oh no, but they need to have a relation. We want to prevent them from doing zina. So there's lots of reasons why there may be fatwas like this, but the fact that it has come to the attention of authorities, it shows that it is a serious situation. And in most cases, it always detriments the woman. The husband is the one that goes from place to place. He goes here, he studies here, then he goes over there, works, has this and has a few in different countries. And it is becoming a recognised issue. So it's not just within Australia, but it is something that even Muslim countries are looking at trying to legislate against, because in the end, it is actually going against her Islamic rights, and it is breaching, multiple situations of, inter-jurisdictional laws.
Okay, thank you. I just want to move to, there's a question on the children. I want to go on to that. So obviously with divorce, children are usually kind of caught in the middle, and sometimes they get impacted more than the couples perhaps. So how do we actually build better relationships with the co-parents after divorce, like between the co-parents, and especially when it comes to children, how should the children be treated throughout this process of divorce?
Yeah, interesting. We actually covered that topic today during our
Okay,
peer support
yeah.
group, and Tamana was one of our presenters. So I'm going to hand over to you,
Yeah.
Tamana. I think just to clarify your question, what is the context of the question? As in, how do you
How does it
manage
impact the children?
the relate?
How
Or
does
how does it
divorce-
impact
yeah,
on the
that's
children?
right.
Okay, I might have a short, then I'll pass it over
Yep.
to you.
Mhm.
Some of the studies that we looked at on impacts divorce has on children, adults and then their children, found that the impact of divorce was multiplied significantly to the children after divorce. So what that actually means is children felt the impact of divorce more than the parents. They don't, and what exacerbated it is, depending on the age, they didn't necessarily have the tools and the mechanisms to actually manage what they were feeling, what they were experiencing. Now, what made that worse is if the parents were in a high conflict situation where there were, lots of aggression and lots of sort of negative messages coming and going, the children were stuck in the middle of it, what made it worse. Right. So if you're asking about the impacts are there. And until you've actually experienced it and walked it. Now I've had, I say privilege now because alhamdulillah, God gives you these experiences sometimes to be able to share the insights with others. I have traveled down that road and I have witnessed firsthand the emotional and psychological impact divorce has at various levels of conflict throughout the years. And I can tell you from an experiential lens that the children may not necessarily tell you, I'm angry, I'm sad. They may do things to show you that they're angry and sad. They may behave in a certain way, and it takes years to undo that pain and a lot of intervention. So impact, yes. Co-parenting. He's got the legal lens.
I think just in terms of the impact on children, if I could speak to that as well, I think we can't undermine how difficult it is for children. I think we all know it, but I'll tell you firsthand, there are kids that have physical body reactions to separation and high conflict. So they throw up all the time. They don't know why their body's doing it. There's nothing wrong. They're eating normal food. They can't stop throwing up because they're so anxious about the conflict between their parents. They wet bedwet, older children start bedwetting. anxiety is, a serious issue for people, when they, especially children, when they see their parents go through divorce. So I think in terms of managing it, co-parenting is a really good word, because you've separated from the other person, but you need to navigate something that is a joint venture, right? Those kids belong to both of you. So the way I speak to my clients about it is I say, you've got to move on from speaking to the other person as an intimate, as a partner, to a business partner. And you have a joint venture, which is the children. So everything should start to become more business-like, succinct, short. Take the emotion out of it. If you can't communicate, there are apps nowadays that you can tap into. So one is called Family Wizard, and it cleans up your language. So for example, I'm not kidding. It gives you ideas on how to speak to the other person. So if you are, particularly people who are in abusive relationships and they get put down a lot, they get called names, don't communicate with the other person unless it's through that app. That app won't let you swear. That app will take away any form of abuse. It also gives you suggestions. So if you're being passive aggressive, it says, how about this instead? And it could be a simple sentence that you're writing to the other person. It's actually quite educational, because a lot of people fall into patterns during the marriage that they continue afterwards. And that high conflict naturally has an impact on the children. If they can reduce that conflict, those children fare much better. So they can actually do as well as other kids if the parents can actually get on amicably. And you don't have to be buddies with the other person or their family. But I think the effort in trying to deal with that with less conflict, better communication. There's also all sorts of resources for people out there, like family therapy. There are courses for men and women post-separation that are really helpful, that actually normalize the separation process. They validate your experience. There are courses for children. So you can take your kids where there are other like little 10-year-olds, 9-year-olds going through it, and they can actually have some support around. There's a facilitator. They talk about the emotions, But the key thing for the individuals to remember is that children absorb everything. So when you're talking to your family about him and they're sitting right there, they will absorb all that. It's very important to be mindful. As much as people are in pain, I think you don't realize how much the children absorb it. So you've got to really separate them from that divorce. There shouldn't be a party to it.
Thank you. Yes, Tamana. Again, just moving on the theme with children, Sheikh, what would you say to this? We have lost attraction to each other, but are staying for the sake of our children, staying together for the sake of our children. Are we able to still live with each other without divorce?
Short answer, yes, you can still live without divorce. This question was posed to Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu arda, when somebody came to him. He said, I've fallen out of love for my wife, and I'm thinking of divorcing her and leaving her, or words to that effect. And then Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, and are all the households built upon love? He goes, what about respect? What about the goodness? What about kindness? What about this? And what about that? So if you can stay in the marriage without impacting without causing any injustice to yourself, to your partner, to your family members, then yes, of course you can stay on. If you feel like you can do that. But if you feel that the lack of attraction is going to make you do something wrong, or abuse your partner, or disrespect them, or neglect them, then move on. Move on.
Anyone want to add anything there? Or?
I guess also seek help, seek advice. It's natural in relationships that you kind of, and particularly around very crucial life instances like having children. Having children really upsets that balance between the couples, and it throws out a lot of that sort of established relationship. So it's natural that these things, there'll be an ebb and flow in terms of attraction, in terms of commitment, in terms of expressions. Everyone has different love languages, and these change, they do change over time. So inshallah, with more resources and more support and more, services that are provided by the Muslim community for the Muslim community, these hopefully will be able to help with, these situations, and make people realize that, look, this is not something that is just unique to us. This is something that is, natural and happens in every relationship.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. It's good that you interjected there, because that's a very important point. I was just answering the question, but definitely intervention is always something, because there's questions to be asked. Like, were you once upon a time attracted? Yes. Okay. What happened? So maybe we can rekindle that. There's ways of rekindling that, and sometimes the attraction could be because of some mental issues that are going on, of some behaviors that took place, and they don't know how to forgive, and so that becomes the block to that lack of forgiveness. So I have a case at the moment that I'm working on, and because she betrayed him in one way or another, he's now switched off. And that was a long time ago. And then she's showing her regret and her remorse. It wasn't like anything like really super bad. Like it was something, but and then we're now taking them through, well, why don't you try this? And this is what Islam says, and this is what you can reframe the way that you're looking at it. So yeah, you need to come in from a psychological perspective in helping that person see his partner in a different light, inshallah, than the one he's looking at her through. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Jazakallah khair.
No worries. There's a legal question here, and so the question goes: how does splitting of assets work in divorce? When it comes to property and asset settlement, should we be following Islamic principles? If so, what are these, or Family Law Act mandates?
Tricky question.
Yeah.
I have lots of thoughts on this,
Yeah,
but
okay.
I'm going to stay safe.
All right. No problem.
From what I understand, and there is a diverse opinions on this from the imams, and I'm no Islamic scholar, but I have spoken to different imams on this issue. And the one I gravitate most to, and I agree with, is the one that says the Australian legal system and the way it does the property asset division is quite Islamic. In that it looks at contributions of both parties, it looks at needs of both parties, and it splits the assets. We're no longer in a time where a woman comes into a marriage with assets and they stay separate during the marriage. Most relationships now in Australia, the assets mix. The wife is working. The contributions, she might bring in more than him. So this flat or one-way approach where the man keeps everything and gives her the dowry no longer flies in Australia. Obviously, in the civil system, it's all looked through the lens of contributions and needs. The Islamic scholar that I spoke to, who was also a lawyer, had the same view. So I don't really see that there is any conflict there. I think a lot of the problems lie in what people are told. And a lot of women that come to me are told that they should just accept the mahar, which is a real problem.
And sometimes they don't receive it either.
And even then they forego it.
Most of the
time.
time. Yeah, that's right.
So
No,
I'll
thank
stay
you.
short,
No,
but-
thank you. Sheikh, did you want to add anything to that? Or?
Look, the issue is there's going to, like I said before, the scholars are going to have different stands, different opinions. Look, it does come down to also the contributions. Did she make a contribution? You got the mahar is a part of it, but if you're going to look at it, pure black and white Islam, you're going to see this: the mahar is there, nafaqa is there, which is the maintenance. So really, but then again, scholars do look at the time and the place and the context and the world that we live in. There is a lot that scholars. This is more like now going into the area of fiqh al-waqi' and the fiqh of the current circumstances and the world that we live in. So it's not really my area, to be honest with you, to comment about that. Like I said, because there's going to be scholars who've now studied this, and there's boards of imams and things like that. It's different. I've heard imams in this country on the minbar in prominent mosques say that, you know, she's only entitled to her mahar, right? And that's all she's going to get. And she's entitled, of course, to anything that she has contributed in terms of monetary amount. But that's about it. And that's how we've always been trained in the past. But like I said, things are now shifting.
Ahmed, I'll just quickly add to that, you on the subject of fiqh al-waqa and then the whole legal.
Yeah, if you could raise your voice
What-
a bit. Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
sure, I'm happy
Yeah,
to do that.
yeah.
What we have heard from the women in our community is one of the most significant barriers to their healing has been the legal, the misunderstanding, the fear that they have around what I'm entitled to, what I'm not. Now, in the perfect world where spousal maintenance is being paid up until the iddah period is served, where child support is being paid for the child, where the needs and everything, when the principles of Islam, the tenets of Islam are being adhered to, that's like an ideal perfect world scenario. But what we're seeing is that in these situations where the men are saying, or the women are saying, the legal drove me nuts. No child support was being paid. They're living almost below the poverty line, trying to feed these children. Some have children with special needs. So then when the legal avenue is presented in front of them and there has been a genuine contribution by the woman, some of the women have said, this is how I will be compensated for the child support that he has not currently paid and that he will have to pay in the future that he may not honour and pay. So women are approaching this from a different lens, whether rightly or wrongly, whether it's a reaction to the position that some imams are taking, that black and white position on, you only take your mahar. Well, he didn't pay my mahar. All right. I did work. I served him. Some women have served for 20 years. And the discussion with the Imam scholars is around contributions. There is a compensation in Islam for this type of service to the relationship. And women are starting to do things out of resentment and spite of the system that is meant to be there to protect them.
Yeah.
Just on the issue of contributions.
Yeah.
So obviously in the Australian legal system, the contributions are considered both financial and non-financial contributions. So, and they're deemed equivalent. So if you have gone and worked the whole relationship and the other person has stayed home and cared for the children in the home, those are deemed as 50-50 contributions. The imam that I mentioned before, the position that I tend to lean towards, accepts that in the Islamic framework, there is space for non-financial contributions of the woman. And that's partly because when the man goes out to work, obviously she's at home caring. If she just sat at home and did nothing and her kids were cared for externally, she didn't clean the house, that's different. But if she was doing the house duties, that's enabling them to financially be in a better position because she's staying there and doing her duties. So not that those are her duties, but if she chooses to is what I mean. So non-financial contributions do have a space in the Islamic framework as far as I've been informed. But clearly, like the imam said, there are imams that completely, even if you financially contributed, they say the mahar is all you get. Unfortunately, though, that renders a lot of women homeless with 3 or 4 children. And I have situations that come to me where the husband has remained in the home, has already repartnered, and she is on the street in a home, seeking refuge with 3 or 4 children. And to me, no matter how you cut that up Islamically, it does not seem Islamic or fair. And I don't think that is the intention or the purpose of any law or legal system, certainly not one that favors women, which we understand. So there's something that's going wrong.
Yeah, thank you, Sister Tamana. By the way, I haven't given space to people on the floor. My apologies. We just got caught up in conversation here. Is there any questions that anyone wants to ask here? Yeah, I'll give you. Okay, no worries. Thank you.
Thanks. This has been illuminating. And I think I have one reflection first, if that's okay, especially with regards to women and honoring women up front when, they are entitled to their dowry. But it seems to me that, women generally by nature or by expectation do a lot of the emotional heavy lifting in relationships and the adapting. And I know as a convert, I've seen many converts over the years who they learn their husband's language, they learn to cook his food, they move from place to place, and you know, women, yeah, they really do put in their work to serve. So I would be a big advocate for taking that dowry up front. Or at least
Thank you, sister.
installments.
No,
But
worries.
I think my
Is there a
question is,
question?
yeah, sorry.
No,
My
worries.
question is, why do you think it is that men, and I'm going to speak in gendered terms here,
Yeah.
men can be so resistant to divorce? Because I went through that myself 10 years ago. Why is it the case, do you think, from a, cognitive psychology perspective or from your experience, Sheikh?
Okay, thank you. Where should we start? Sheikh? I heard the Sheikh at the end, yeah.
He's the male panelist, so
Yeah, we need one more apart from me. So, did you want to take that, Sheikh? Or? Yeah.
Part of it,
Yeah,
inshallah.
no problem.
So why the question really is around why is this the man being resisting to issue the divorce, right?
You said it's common.
Yes, it's common that to resist, and that could be that could be due to, I mean, he could love her in his way, and he doesn't want to let go of her. He doesn't want anybody else to have her. He wants her all for himself. He has a diseased heart, and he just wants to continue to oppress her. He's narcissistic, and it could be that he just doesn't want to go. He genuinely loves her, but he wants to love her his way, not her way, right? That's a lot of the times that seems to be the case. As for the whole dowry thing, that's just like trying to hold her down and see if he can keep her in this relationship, because he wants to continue to have her. Doesn't want to really spoil the family. So but he's not prepared to get help for his anger issues or his gambling issues or his addictions. He doesn't want to admit that he's in denial, that he is that he has a problem. So these are some of the things that just come to my mind. Inshallah, maybe the other panelists can share.
Thank you, Sheikh.
Control, I think I would
Control.
say, did you want to, oh,
Yeah,
sorry. There is definitely an element of control. See, the way we understand the reasons that men have refused divorce and some experiences that were shared with us is the husband has lost control by virtue of you signaling or leaving the relationship. So what form of control remains? Financial control, or I can control the direction of this divorce. So control seems to be the most common thing depending on the community. I've had some stories where the men have held their woman hostage to a divorce, and under duress have requested that she sign off particular documents in order to be granted a divorce. There are women till this day who are waiting for their divorce through one of the boards and the processes. 2 years they've been waiting. There are women who have been waiting for 4 years. So there's an element of control in this, I think.
Yeah, can I add to that? Yeah, I concur with Soumaya in that a lot of the times the way I see it play out is people have legal proceedings on foot, and it's another element of power. So in that dynamic, they'll say, okay, if you let go of the legal proceedings, if you don't go after the house or the car or whatever, then I will give you the divorce. So it's kind of leveraged against, or if you give me more time with the children, then I'll give you the divorce. So, and obviously we're generalizing. It doesn't apply to all men. I'm sure there are situations where the man might be in love with his wife and just doesn't want to let her go, right? Like, I'm sure there are situations like that. But the way it plays out in the sphere that I see, in the space that I see, is all about that power element and leveraging it off against other things he wants as part of that separation package.
Yeah.
I think also there's a lot of education that we need to do around healthy relationships. Clearly, there's the husbands now that are causing this problem. There's perhaps some intergenerational trauma or something that they witnessed in their parents' relationship. They saw their father being controlling. They saw, and so it comes to a point where the community, us, today, also, either from just, an individual family unit, we try to identify what those harmful practices are in terms of relationships and control and expectations, and we try to bring in good things, but again, this takes time, and this takes a lot of effort, and it takes I know that I've got 4 children, and I know that from the time when my first child was born almost 16 years ago to when my 7-year-old now, the youngest one, I've learned a lot as a parent. There's a lot more resources and services and things that we can learn about how to manage our triggers because our children trigger us. We can learn, and there's lots more Muslims who are in this space, who are giving parenting advice, who are giving psychological advice, who are giving family therapy advice, and it may take a couple of generations, but everyone's got to, if they really want to move forward and think about, you've always think, okay, what are we showing to our children in terms of their healthy relationships? How are we going to make sure that they marry someone and have a healthy and supportive relationship? So it's kind of you've got to break certain habits and practices, and it's an ongoing practice. But I think now with supports and obviously social media is a good thing in that sense, that if you follow certain Muslims who are really doing good things in these spaces, there's a lot more, particularly for women who perhaps are stuck at home, who are in the midst of the craziness of the children and the expectations from in-laws and parents and husbands, that they can access a lot of this, even if like this now, being online. It creates spaces and access. It breaks those barriers down for women who can't make that time. They can watch it later. And but yeah, I just wanted to say that like family relationships it takes quite a few generations sometimes to kind of address these issues.
Thank you, Dr. Anisa. We're coming towards the end of the event, but before we finish, maybe if I could have last words. Tamana,
You really put me on the spot.
we'll just go around. Like, if you want to say anything at all, just to wrap it up.
No, I think I'm really happy that ISRA has run an event like this, and I think I haven't seen one where we're talking about divorce so openly, with obviously a diverse backgrounds, diverse view sets, and so I think more of these events are needed in our community to normalize the discussions around divorce. So congratulations to ISRA.
Yeah, I second that, and I say the 3.6% Australian Muslims who recorded their status as divorced in the ABS census tonight they thank you for this. It's long overdue. We're building these supports and these resources, having a platform like this to discuss the narratives, the various narratives around divorce are going to be helpful. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the barakah and strength to continue to deliver divorce support and recovery services. We're pioneering some now. We're piloting, testing, learning and growing. With platforms like this, inshallah, we can only go from strength to strength. So jazakallah khair.
Thank you. Dr. Anisa, back to you. Did you want to add anything? It's a final
I guess I just wanted
message.
to add on to what Tamana said, that in terms of it's good to see people who've got such different specializations. You've got, lawyers, you've got people who work in, the policy, as well as, doing these great initiatives, academics and shuyukh. So I think it's great that we start have these forums where so many people from different perspectives and different places in society are able to come together and talk about these issues.
Yes, thank you. It is hard to bring people together. Like, I mean, I haven't done much in terms of organizing this, but I have in the past. For example, I'll call 15 people literally, and they would decline. They don't want to appear with someone else, etc. Like, it's just the politics, and it's. But yeah, thank you very much, Sheikhana. What about yourself?
Jazakumullahu khairan, Isra. This was a remarkable event, and inshallah it's beneficial to all. I think we focused a lot on post marriage and divorce, but I think and that's very, very important, and I agree that there must be courses and programs to help those who are going through divorce and understand that it's normal, get excited about the process. It's qadr. You need to just, but you need to go through the right avenues, the right people. I totally resonate with that, and I believe that's much needed. But I think even more importantly, and Allah knows best, is pre-marriage, in understanding what you're in for, especially the converts. The converts just come into this and they just think they're going to marry some religious guy who knows how to pray and who knows he fasts and he looks the part, but he's just bad news, maybe, inshallah he isn't, but you need to know spouse selection, you need to know about trauma, you need to know about attraction, you need to know about roles, you need to know about the rules. There's so much to know, and subhanallah, I learned a lot of this on the job, and consequently, alhamdulillah, Allah's blessed me with a healthy relationship, but I'm still learning. And there's a saying that says the intelligent person learns from his own mistakes, and the wise person learns from the mistakes of others. So these programs, subhanallah, I know in Malaysia they have programs. I don't know if they still have them now, but they used to have these programs where you can't get married without having done some sort of marriage course. They still have it probably, right? And I could have sworn I've come across this statistic, but I just couldn't find it again. But the statistic was something like divorce rates in Malaysia once upon a time were in the 30% margins, and then they introduced mandatory pre-marriage counseling, and then fast track 10 years later, that statistic went down to under 10%. But don't quote me on the numbers, but more or less it was something like that. And I thought, wow, that's so true, because subhanallah, you're young, you're just looking through the lens of hormones and movies and romance stories and things like that, and then you realize reality, and you realize you've got issues from your parents. And that's a question, subhanallah, as a counselor myself, one of the first questions that I ask is, I have a series of questions, and one of the first questions is, tell me about your parents, and tell me about their marriage, and tell me about your upbringing, because now that's going to tell me a lot about what's going on here. And what we've realized with divorce is that, subhanallah, with trauma, that the biggest competitor that we've found in the relationships is your partner's past. And the partner's past, or your past, how it shows up in the marriage is it shows up in the way that you conflict, it shows in the way you love, and it shows up in the way that you apologize. So and subhanallah, so I've realized how much. And we're not taught any of this in Sharia, I mean, now it's changing and introducing psychology into Sharia. But I mean, back in my days, that was like, there's no talk of any of this stuff, and love languages and human needs and values and those sort of things, and personality types, and and attachment styles, so when I started learning all of this stuff, I just found it so fascinating, so relevant, and I really think if you're an imam, if you're an upcoming imam, you need to know this stuff if you're going to be in the space of marriage, because a lot of mashayikh, a lot of scholars, they are celebrants. They're doing these, and the first point of contact of a couple is going to be, if they have problems, is mostly going to be you. And you need to have the knowledge, the right knowledge, to help them unpack this strategically. And interestingly, subhanAllah, I'll just leave off on this statistic, because you mentioned statistic, and it said that, I mean, this was a statistic in the West, but I'm thinking it's, it's quite applicable wherever you are. 70% of divorces are known as no-fault divorce, meaning it wasn't gambling, it wasn't the addictions, it wasn't the infidelity, but it was just that you grew apart. And that's why it's important to understand, that when you come to get married, you marry a person who shares your vision, your values, your beliefs, And if you don't marry that person, then yes, divorce can become quite real. Wallahu alam wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad.
And in the same breath, the
Yeah.
way you come to know how to get married, it's really important for us to learn how to divorce right.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
seeing that some of the statistics do indicate that second marriages, I think it was 60% likely to end in divorce. And while we're on this topic, it's probably a good idea to create a divorce course as well.
Yes, thank you, inshallah. Well, it's been a very colorful night and some very interesting discussions. I just want to thank our speakers tonight for sharing their insights, being open and all the experience and expertise that they have. I think they've been very generous in sharing with us. But I want to thank the team behind tonight as well, organizing team. I know we have quite a few people online as well. We want to thank you for joining us tonight and the people here on site. We do hope that you can continue to follow us through with other events, other programs as well. We do have a exciting new course, with the Quran study program, which is starting next Tuesday, and we're hoping to go through the Surah Fatiha and Baqarah with the guidance of different tafsirs and teachers. I myself will be one of the teachers as well. You can find the details online, inshallah. If you're feeling a bit disconnected from the Quran since Ramadan, this might be a good opportunity to reconnect, inshallah. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your night.